Loneliness and solitude are often mistaken for the same state of being, yet they are vastly different experiences that lead the human spirit down entirely separate paths. Loneliness is a psychological and emotional void, a sense of disconnection, not just from others, but from the essence of one's own being. It is possible to be surrounded by friends, family, or colleagues and still feel deeply lonely, because the underlying rupture lies within the relationship we have with ourselves. This inner absence leaves a person feeling empty, restless, and perpetually in search of something external to fill the internal gap. In contrast, solitude is a conscious choice to be apart from others, a deliberate withdrawal that is neither filled with despair nor driven by a fear of abandonment. It is not a condition of lack, but rather a fertile ground for self-discovery and inner growth. When a person embraces solitude, they step into a space where they can hear their own thoughts without interference, feel their own emotions without the distortions of external judgment, and explore their own identity beyond the roles imposed by society. In modern culture, where constant interaction and stimulation are normalized, solitude is often misunderstood as a sign of sadness or failure, when in reality it can be a profound act of self-care and self-realization. It is in moments of solitude that the mind is free to wander, reflect, and connect with the deeper layers of the psyche. The noise of the outside world fades, allowing the inner voice to speak with clarity. Loneliness often drives individuals to seek validation, comfort, or distraction from others in order to momentarily silence the discomfort of their inner void. However, this reliance on external connections to soothe internal wounds rarely produces lasting fulfillment. The feelings return when the distractions fade, because the true cause of loneliness lies in the disconnection from oneself. Solitude, on the other hand, invites a person to turn inward and address the root of this disconnection. Instead of running from the discomfort, one learns to sit with it, understand it, and transform it into self-knowledge. The difference between these two states is also felt in the emotional texture they carry. Loneliness often comes with anxiety, longing, and a sense of incompleteness, while solitude is infused with peace, creativity, and a gentle fullness. The solitude seeker does not depend on the presence of others for their sense of worth or identity, because they have developed a stronger inner foundation. In this way, solitude is empowering. It is an act of reclaiming one's own mind and spirit from the demands of the crowd. From a psychological perspective, solitude is essential for growth because it allows the conscious and unconscious minds to communicate more freely. Without the constant demands of social life, the symbols, dreams, and intuitions that normally go unnoticed begin to surface. This provides a clearer picture of one's authentic desires, values, and fears. The individual can then act from a place of greater self-awareness, rather than from unconscious conditioning or societal pressure. Loneliness blinds us to these deeper truths, because the pain of feeling cut off overshadows the ability to listen inwardly. Ultimately, the difference between loneliness and solitude lies not in the external circumstances, but in the internal posture toward them. Two people may be in the same physical situation of being alone, yet one may feel abandoned while the other feels liberated. This shift from emptiness to fullness comes from building a relationship with oneself, learning to be one's own companion, to appreciate one's own company, and to find meaning in the quiet spaces of life. In solitude, the self is no longer a stranger, but a trusted friend, and the fear of being alone dissolves into the calm recognition that this inner companionship can never be taken away. When a person spends time in solitude, the elaborate construction of the persona begins to weaken. The persona is the social mask we wear to interact with the world. The image, carefully crafted to meet expectations, fit into cultural norms, and protect us from judgment. It is not inherently false, but it is incomplete. representing only the part of ourselves that we feel is acceptable to reveal. This mask serves a purpose in society, enabling smooth relationships and providing a degree of stability in how others perceive us. However, it also conceals vast portions of our authentic nature, pushing them into the background where they wait, unseen, often unacknowledged. In daily life, constant social interaction reinforces the persona as we play roles based on context. Employee, parent, friend, partner, each requiring adjustments to speech, behavior, and even emotion. The presence of others sustains this performance, because every social exchange is an implicit stage on which the persona acts. Yet in solitude, when there is no audience, the necessity of the performance fades. The scripts we recite out of habit no longer serve a purpose, and in their absence, the deeper self begins to surface. This emergence can be unsettling because it often reveals aspects of the psyche that have been ignored or repressed. The disintegration of the persona in solitude is not a violent tearing away, but a gradual erosion, like a mask softening in the rain. Without the constant reinforcement of external validation or the feedback of social roles, we begin to notice the thoughts, emotions, and impulses that exist beneath the surface. Some of these may be surprising or uncomfortable, especially those belonging to what Jung called the shadow, the collection of traits, desires, and memories that the conscious self rejects or denies. Alone with ourselves, these hidden elements are harder to avoid, and they begin to speak more clearly. The meeting with the shadow is one of the most transformative moments solitude can offer. We may discover feelings of envy, anger, vulnerability, or longing that we have worked hard to conceal, even from ourselves. At first, this can produce resistance or discomfort, as the mind tries to cling to the safety of the persona. But the more we acknowledge these shadow aspects without judgment, the more we realize they are not enemies to be destroyed, but parts of ourselves that hold vital energy and insight. They become guides to deeper self-understanding, showing us where our growth and healing must occur. As the persona crumbles, authenticity takes its place. This is not a sudden leap into some perfect version of the self, but a slow, honest unveiling. The individual begins to speak, think, and act in ways less influenced by social scripts and more aligned with their inner truth. Relationships formed after such self-revelation are richer because they are built on what is real rather than what is merely presentable. The person no longer seeks to mold themselves endlessly to fit external demands, but instead finds the courage to stand as they are, even when that risks disapproval. The process of the persona's dissolution in solitude also fosters creativity and self-expression. Freed from the pressure to conform to expected roles, the mind can explore new possibilities without fear of how they will be perceived. Ideas flow more freely when they are not being filtered for social acceptability. This opens the door to innovation, art, and new perspectives on life that might have been impossible to access while the persona dominated the inner landscape. Thus, solitude becomes both the challenge and the gift. The challenge is in facing the parts of ourselves that the persona has long hidden, while the gift lies in reclaiming these lost aspects and integrating them into a more complete and genuine self. Over time, the relationship between the persona and the deeper self becomes more balanced. The mask is no longer a rigid prison, but a flexible tool used consciously rather than unconsciously. In this way, the breaking down of the persona through solitude is not an act of destruction, but of liberation, revealing the depth and wholeness that can only emerge when we are willing to meet ourselves without disguise. Facing the shadow is an unavoidable step when solitude strips away the layers of distraction and performance that usually shield us from our own depths. The shadow, as Jung described it, contains all the qualities, impulses, and emotions that the conscious mind refuses to accept. These are not always negative in a moral sense. They can include strengths and desires that simply do not fit the image we wish to maintain. Yet, because they are denied, they live in the unconscious, influencing our behavior from behind the scenes. Most people project these elements onto others, seeing in the outside world what they cannot face in themselves. Solitude interrupts this cycle by creating a situation where the other person is absent and the reflection we must look at is our own. This confrontation can feel like meeting a stranger within our own mind. Traits we have carefully hidden, such as selfishness, resentment, or fear, step forward without the buffer of social distraction. At first, the instinct is to turn away, to find something that will drown out the uncomfortable. Awareness, a phone call, a screen, or any task that keeps the mind busy. But solitude has a way of holding us in place, and when we stay in that space long enough, the shadow begins to reveal itself in dreams, sudden thoughts, or shifts in mood. The process of facing the shadow is not about condemnation, but about recognition. The shadow does not vanish when ignored. Instead, it becomes more powerful, surfacing in unconscious reactions, patterns of behavior, and emotional triggers. By seeing it clearly, we remove some of its control. This does not mean approving of harmful impulses, but acknowledging that they exist and that they are part of a larger whole. In doing so, we begin the process of integrating these disowned parts into our conscious identity, which is central to Jung's concept of individuation. Solitude offers the rare chance to observe these shadow aspects without interference. There is no need to defend them or explain them to others. The only dialogue is internal. This makes it possible to approach the shadow with curiosity instead of fear. In these moments, we might discover that what we once thought of as purely negative actually carries energy we can transform. Anger, for example, might point to a violation of our values and awaken a desire to set healthier boundaries. Envy might reveal hidden aspirations we have been afraid to admit. Vulnerability might become a source of empathy and deeper human connection. However, this encounter can also be intense. The shadow often contains unresolved pain from earlier stages of life, memories of rejection, failure, or shame. Solitude can reopen these wounds, which is why so many people resist it. Yet these moments also offer the chance to heal, because they occur in a setting where we can process them at our own pace. Without the need to maintain an image for others, we can feel the emotions fully, reflect on their origins, and gradually release the hold they have over us. As the relationship with the shadow evolves, a sense of wholeness begins to emerge. We start to see that our identity is not made of separate, warring parts, but of interconnected elements that each have a role to play. The shadow's energy, once integrated, can fuel creativity, resilience, and authenticity. It deepens our understanding of ourselves and, by extension, our understanding of others. When we recognize our own capacity for flaws, we become less quick to judge and more capable of compassion. The journey of facing the shadow is ongoing because the unconscious is vast and layered. Each period of solitude can bring new revelations, uncovering aspects of the self we were not ready to see before. But with each encounter, the fear lessens. We learn that the shadow is not a monster to be defeated, but a neglected companion, waiting to be acknowledged. In making peace with it, we not only reclaim lost parts of ourselves, but also gain the inner strength to live more fully and honestly in the world. Individuation through solitude is the process by which a person gradually integrates all aspects of themselves, both conscious and unconscious, into a cohesive whole. It is a journey toward authenticity, where the fragmented parts of the psyche are brought into alignment, allowing the individual to live in greater harmony with their true nature. In the presence of constant external interaction, this process is easily delayed or obscured, because the self becomes entangled in the expectations, judgments, and demands of others. Solitude removes these external pressures, and offers a rare environment where the individual can turn inward, listening to the subtle movements of their inner world without distraction. In solitude, the mind becomes a mirror in which both the familiar and the unfamiliar aspects of the self are reflected. The conscious mind can begin to perceive the layers beneath, the shadow, the anima, or animus, the archetypal images that arise from the collective unconscious. These elements do not emerge all at once. They surface gradually, often through dreams, reflections, and sudden insights. Without the interruptions of daily social life, these inner voices are easier to hear, and their messages clearer. The absence of an audience allows for honesty, as there is no need to modify one's thoughts to meet external expectations. This turning inward is not an escape from the world, but a reorientation toward the source of one's being. It is an active engagement with the psyche, where the individual confronts contradictions, reconciles opposing tendencies, and learns to hold complexity without fragmentation. For example, one might discover that they are both deeply compassionate and capable of anger, or both rational and deeply intuitive. Rather than suppressing one side in favor of the other, individuation seeks to integrate them, creating a more complete and flexible personality. Solitude facilitates this integration because it provides space to process and absorb these revelations without the immediate need to defend or explain them. It is a time when the inner dialogues can unfold without interruption, allowing conflicting aspects of the self to find their place in the overall structure of the personality. The individual can experiment with new ways of thinking, feeling, and acting, observing the results internally before bringing them into the external world. The process can be challenging, as it often requires dismantling long-held illusions and confronting aspects of the self that are uncomfortable or unfamiliar. In solitude, there is no one to validate the old narratives, so they begin to lose their hold. This opens the way for more authentic patterns to emerge. Over time, the individual becomes less dependent on external approval because their sense of identity is rooted in an inner unity rather than in the shifting opinions of others. Individuation also involves a growing relationship with the unconscious, which becomes more accessible in solitude. Dreams become more vivid and meaningful, intuitive insights more frequent, and creative inspiration more spontaneous. These are signals from deeper layers of the psyche, guiding the conscious mind toward greater alignment. By paying attention to these inner messages, the individual learns to navigate life with a sense of inner guidance rather than being solely directed by external forces. As individuation progresses, the person develops a sense of selfhood that is resilient and adaptable. They can engage with the world more authentically because they are not wearing a mask or performing for the sake of belonging. Their actions arise from a place of integrated truth, which allows for relationships that are deeper and more honest. Paradoxically, time spent alone strengthens the ability to connect with others, because the connection is no longer driven by need or fear, but by genuine openness. Through solitude, individuation becomes not just a theoretical concept, but a lived reality. The self becomes a unified whole, capable of containing contradictions, engaging fully with life, and remaining anchored in its own center regardless of external circumstances. This wholeness is the essence of what it means to be truly oneself. Depth in relationships is only possible when an individual has first established a relationship with themselves. Without self-awareness, the connections we form with others are often superficial, driven by unconscious needs, fears, and projections. We approach people not as whole beings, but as placeholders for what we feel is missing in ourselves. This results in relationships that are fragile, easily disrupted when the other person fails to fulfill the role we have assigned them. Solitude disrupts this cycle by forcing us to meet ourselves directly. When we spend time alone and come to understand our own thoughts, emotions, and values, we approach others with a clearer sense of who we are and what we bring to a connection. When a person has not faced their inner life, relationships tend to be governed by dependency. The other becomes a source of validation, a shield against loneliness, or a means to avoid confronting the shadow. This dependency often creates tension because no human being can consistently meet another's unspoken demands. Disappointment follows, leading to conflict, withdrawal, or the constant search for new relationships to fill the void. In contrast, someone who has embraced solitude no longer seeks others to complete them because they have already met their own needs for companionship at the level of the self. This allows them to relate from a place of fullness rather than lack. In solitude, a person learns to navigate their own emotions without relying on another to manage them. They discover their triggers, their patterns of thought, and the ways they may have sabotaged connections in the past. This awareness fosters emotional maturity, which is crucial for sustaining deeper bonds. Instead of reacting impulsively to perceived slights or conflicts, they can pause, reflect, and respond in ways that preserve trust and understanding. Relationships grounded in this maturity are less about control or possession and more about mutual growth and respect. Another way solitude deepens relationships is by clarifying personal boundaries. When we are alone, we become more attuned to our limits and needs because there is no constant negotiation with others to distract us from them. Knowing where one's boundaries lie makes it easier to communicate them clearly and to respect the boundaries of others. This reduces the likelihood of resentment and fosters a sense of safety in relationships, which is essential for intimacy. The individual who has walked through solitude also becomes more accepting of others as they are rather than as they wish them to be. Having faced their own imperfections and complexities, they are less inclined to demand perfection from others. They can tolerate differences, disagreements, and moments of distance without interpreting them as threats. This acceptance nurtures an atmosphere of authenticity where both people feel free to be themselves without fear of constant judgment. Moreover, solitude teaches the value of presence. In the absence of constant interaction, we learn to appreciate the quality of connection over its quantity. When such a person is with others, they are fully there, listening deeply, and engaging without the distraction of unmet internal needs. The relationship becomes an encounter between two whole individuals, each contributing to the exchange, rather than drawing from it as a lifeline. Paradoxically, solitude, which seems at first to be about separation, creates the foundation for the most profound unity. By first learning to be at peace in our own company, we remove the desperation that often underlies our attempts to connect. Relationships formed from this place are not driven by fear of abandonment or the need to escape oneself. Instead, they are chosen freely, sustained by mutual respect, shared growth, and the joy of genuine companionship. In this way, the journey inward becomes the most reliable path toward deeper and more lasting relationships with others. The paradox of loneliness lies in the truth that only by fully embracing solitude can one discover they are never truly alone. On the surface, being alone seems to imply emptiness, separation, and the absence of companionship. This is why so many people seek to avoid it, surrounding themselves with noise, activity, and social engagement to keep the silence at bay. Yet solitude, when entered willingly and with openness, reveals a deeper reality. The self is accompanied by layers of inner life, by memories, dreams, archetypal images, and the quiet presence of the soul itself. What at first appears as isolation becomes a meeting place with one's own depths, a place where the psyche begins to show its vastness. When we resist solitude, loneliness feels like a void, a hollow space that demands to be filled. This is the version of loneliness that leads people to desperate forms of distraction, to relationships that are unhealthy or shallow, and to patterns of dependence that keep them from knowing themselves. But if we stop running and turn toward the experience, the void transforms. We realize that the silence we feared is not empty at all but rich with meaning, waiting to be uncovered. The absence of external company gives way to the presence of an inner world that has always been there, patiently waiting for our attention. This shift is not immediate. At first, solitude can be uncomfortable, even painful, because it confronts us with aspects of ourselves we have long ignored. The shadow comes into view, old memories surface, and hidden emotions rise to the surface. It is tempting to interpret these experiences as proof that being alone is harmful. But in truth, they are signs of a deeper integration beginning to take place. The paradox is that what we feared as loneliness is, in reality, the process of becoming whole. The discomfort is the mind adjusting to a new way of being, one in which we no longer define ourselves solely by the presence or absence of others. In solitude, we also encounter what Jung called the collective unconscious, the vast reservoir of human experience and symbolic patterns that connect all people across time and culture. This connection is not visible in the same way as a conversation or a shared meal, yet it is profound. Dreams might present images that feel ancient or universal. Ideas may arise that echo the thoughts of countless others before us, and a quiet sense of belonging to the larger human story can emerge. This awareness dissolves the sharp edges of loneliness because it reminds us that we are part of something far greater than our immediate social circle. Paradoxically, this inner connection prepares us for outer connection. When we no longer fear solitude, we approach relationships without clinging or desperation. We do not need others to prove our worth or to shield us from ourselves. Instead, we can be with them freely, sharing from a place of abundance rather than lack. Relationships formed in this way are more stable and more meaningful because they are chosen, not required for survival. The paradox of loneliness, then, is that it is not a problem to be solved by constant company, but an invitation to discover the richness within. By entering solitude and staying there long enough to move past the initial discomfort, we uncover a depth of selfhood and a sense of connection that no external relationship can replace. This inner companionship remains with us no matter where we are or who we are with. Far from being a state of deprivation, solitude becomes the ground from which all genuine connection with ourselves, with others, and with the world can grow.